Welcome back, csc200, to part 3 of our President's Foreign Key video series. This is part 3, and I'm just going to make this one very quick. We're just going to do one query on here to keep things a little simpler, but it is something that gets into a little more complicated area, so we're going to just look at one thing here, and this is going to be an inner join, and you can see there's even a little graphic here that you'll see, and you'll see these in other areas too, even in your book, where you're kind of taking two tables here, and we're getting kind of the intersection of information. We're going to take information from both the president's table and the vice president's table and put them together so that we could see names, so that we don't just see numbers. So that's what we're going to do next, and we're going to use this inner join syntax here, and I'm going to just take this as an example and copy this, and at least it'll give us a place to start so we could kind of see how it works. And I'm going to go back to my working code and paste it there. And I'm going to paste it up here in the beginning before I get into that other stuff. So I'll just create some room here and put it in here because we have to work with it a little bit. And there it is. And it says select. And you can see these are columns. So it's a select statement. And then we're going to be taking from two tables. We're going to have the president's table. So we could put that first. And then we're going to have the vice presidents. And I'll just copy that so I don't screw it up when I type it. So those are two things I'm going to do. And I'll even break things up on different lines here. So these are going to be our columns, and notice that they're using this dot syntax so that you know where they're coming from. You don't always have to do this, but we're going to try and do it, and we're going to do it without the dot syntax first, and then we'll add that after because it'll make more sense. So we want to know what columns do we want, and we'll put the president's ID first because that's the number of presidents. So we're going to put that first, and you could even do this. I know this is just adding more to it, but remember we can do this. We can put number and even a period like that. Because remember, it's just for display purposes. So we can say ID as number. We could do that. And then we're going to do last name. And we're going to do that. And we could do that as president because we're just going to use that. Another column. So we're using the ID and the last name from the president's column. And then from the vice presidents, we're going to put their last name. We could even put their first name and last name. So we can take these and use first name, last name. And we don't have to do anything about VP right there. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And if we want to put one more in here, we can even put the VP ID. So we can put that there too. And we'll put that at the end. Okay. And we'll check this just to make sure we don't need a semicolon after that. And we don't, because it all kind of goes together. And then this is from presidents. Now we are going to put the dot syntax in here. So we are going to do that. So we can even put presidents dot, and then I'm going to copy this, and this will just make things a little bit clearer when we do this. President's dot, and again, we don't need it here because this is what's going to display, and this is going to be vice president's dot. Now this is going to make it longer, so after a comma here we can just break this, and then I'm going to copy the word vice president's table, and I'm going to put that in front of here and make sure I put a dot, and then put it here and make sure I put a dot, and then put it here and make sure I put a dot. So I have all my data, those are all the columns that I want displayed. And we're going to say from the presidents, and the inner join is from vice presidents. And we're going to say on, and what do we really want to display here? And we basically want to match up where the ID from presidents is equal to the president's ID as the foreign key from that table. Now you'll see what I mean when I do this, but this is going to be presidents. And when I put it in here, it might make more sense of what we really want to see because we want to match these up. We want to match up them so they all line up together so that all of the vice presidents with their ID, so if they have number 44, it matches up with the 44 of Barack Obama so that you see all the vice presidents with the presidents. And we'll see what happens here. So these are trying to line them up. So this is going to be vice presidents again. So I can copy this table name and put that here. And if this is president's ID, this is going to be vice president's pres ID, because remember that's what we called it. So it's matching up. The primary key here is matching up with the foreign key. We're kind of matching up the primary key of the one table with the foreign key of the other to make sure that they all line up, and then we're going to display the names. So let's just see what happens here. Let's see if we have everything right. And sometimes the only way to know is if we do it. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to go down here, and I'll give myself some extra room, and I'll paste that in, and let's just see what happens. And we have something displaying, so that's what we want. Let's look at our columns up here. and we have number, and this is the number of all the presidents. And this is the president. This is the first name. I could have renamed these as like, VP first name, VP last name, or not even had first name. We could always change it now that we have it and it's working. And what's happening here is we're matching up the ID with the foreign key. So we don't see the foreign key here. This is the actual ID from the vice president's table. So we're not seeing the foreign key. We're just matching up these with their foreign key to the primary key here, so they're all lining up. And that's why in some cases we even have like George Clinton with one president, George Clinton with another president. Even in some cases we have Millard Fillmore with Fillmore because he didn't have a vice president, so we put that all together. So we're keeping this in order, but we're making sure that every president matches up with his vice president, even if they didn't have one. So even if it is Fillmore, it's just showing the same person over here. So these should all match up. So if we go down here, we should have Trump, and then we should have Mike Pence, Obama, and Joe Biden, Bush, and Dick Cheney, Clinton, Al Gore. So we have these all matched up. So if we wanted to change any of the names in here, instead of just first name, you could just put VP, first name, VP. That's easy to do. Maybe you don't want to have this number over here. Maybe this doesn't have any purpose. That's fine. You could go back here. Now that we have this and we know what's happening, maybe you could say, well, I don't really need to display that. That doesn't really help us here, seeing their ID. But one thing that may help us is to have vice president first name as something like, we'll call it VP first name. And I'm using quotes because we have spaces here. And then I'll just copy it again. And I'll put this at the end. And I'll even go back here and this is going to be as VP last name. Now that just might look a little bit better. And I don't need a comma here, but I do need a comma in between those two columns. So that should be okay. So I'm just going to copy this and see what happens. And there's my join that I'm using that has overlapping data. And there it is. Now I could look through here and say, oh, the sixth president, Adams, now I don't have their first name, had Calhoun. And even Andrew Jackson had Calhoun. Now, first names might help here. We could go in and put a first name for the president if we want. Or we could just put VP last name, and maybe they don't care about their first name, although there's some duplicates here. So that way we took away the ID, which really isn't helping us. We renamed the columns up here, which looks a lot better than we have. And you could certainly do different things here. And I'll give you some other challenges to do with this first join. And again, we're not going really deep into this. We're just kind of touching on this a little bit because we're going to start working with other databases instead of the presidents, because there's going to be other data that's going to work better for related tables than certainly this one. But I wanted to try this out since we were talking about having vice president databases and having cabinet members and different things that would be a different entity. So we have a different entity. Vice presidents is a different entity in our database. It's not duplicating data, but there is a relation because vice presidents serve presidents. So that's what we're doing here. And we're showing that we can put this data together and display it all together without having to duplicate the same information in the same table. We're going to stop here with this one, and I'll go back and we can just look at the code again. This is the code that we did to actually do that inner join, and we're going to be doing more with this as the semester goes on, but that was our first little taste of an inner join, and that's the end of part 3 of our President's Foreign Key. And one last thing I just want to mention at the end, don't forget to check for your challenge. That's going to be part of the instructions. I'll give you some challenges that are based on what we did here in the video. And also, I may put comments in your code, so if you ever look at code and you see something with a pound sign in, something, like this, and, I might sign it like RH, that's me showing that I'm inside your console and I could see things in there. So I might say, hey, this is okay. You could close it up and you could go back into your recent consoles and hit the little X thing and kill it if you want. If you leave these things going, it's not a big deal either, but at some point, now that we're done with the presidents, if you finished up exercise 2 and 3, we're pretty much done with the president databases, so you don't have to keep this open, as long as I looked at it and you have all your information. So look for little comments there, and don't forget about the challenges that you're going to do with this exercise as well.